Hello and welcome to Circle Time, the Early Years podcast. Now, my guest this week has worked in the safeguarding and child protection arena for around 30 years, which has led to them working directly with children and developing services for young children and their families through the delivery of Sure Start Children's Centres and early intervention services. They're the author of Developing Child-Centred Practice for Safeguarding and Child Protection, Strategies for Every Early Years Setting, published by Routledge as part of their Little Minds Matter series in February 2023. She's a regular writer and contributor for Nursery World magazine, co-founder of the Early Years Hub and founder of the Early Years Hub Safeguarding Hub, the amazing online resource and learning community for designated safeguarding leads. Welcome to Circle Time, Rachel Buckler.
Well, thank you very much, Glenn. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you today. That's a long list, isn't it?
It was. You've done a lot, haven't you?
Yes, and it just reminds me when we go through that list. But yes, it's a pleasure to be with you today and talking about this really important topic and theme. So yeah, thank you for inviting me.
I know you're welcome. I know for me, I know safeguarding is one of the core foundations that I do throughout my practice, and I instill it through my team's practice in the setting that I manage as well. But I mean, sum up what it means. Why do we need child protection?
Yeah, well, it's just interesting because I'm really quite keen on helping people understand that when we talk about safeguarding and child protection, they're slightly different. I know we kind of bring it all together under the banner of safeguarding. And safeguarding, I guess, means a whole range of things. Child protection means something not very different, but slightly different. But if we start off with some generalistically or generally safeguarding, of course, let's be honest, we're working with some of the most youngest and vulnerable children, aren't we? Vulnerable because of their ages, I'm thinking, not necessarily because of other reasons, although that is the case for often in early years settings. And I've always flown the flag for early years and their unique position to be able to work with those younger children and families and children who are vulnerable for lots of reasons and lots of risks that might be they might be exposed to. But in terms of safeguarding, why is it so important? Because children need us to be their advocates, because children need us to be their, I suppose, that they need us to be there for us to not only just to be supporting and protecting them in terms of their well-being and in their protection, but also they need us if they are in positions that make them vulnerable or at risk. They need us to step in to do something about it. So that's why it's so important. I suppose ultimately is an easy answer to that question, but yeah, they're reliant on adults to do a good job for them, aren't they? And I suppose that's really why it's so important. And also families are also reliant on us to help them do a good job. In terms of being able to meet the needs of their children, when sometimes it might be a little tricky or challenging, or in some cases it might be quite difficult for whatever reason. So yeah, I guess that's the kind of general answer I would give to that.
It is. I mean, I think when you mentioned one word there that resonated with me was the advocate, being the advocate for the child, particularly our younger ones, so our under threes or our under twos, who haven't got the words to express how they're feeling. It's that understanding, that being able to spot the signs, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it is being able to spot the signs, and that's where children are reliant on us to really understand and have a basis, a good sound basis of knowledge and understanding about what risks are for them. And I think yeah, absolutely. So identifying, being able to identify what those risks are, but then also being really competent as practitioners working with children to be able to know what to do next, and also know what to do in terms of different levels of interventions that we think are appropriate given what we identify. I talk a lot about different levels of need for children in the context of maybe some children need us to respond in terms of developing early intervention strategies for them. And I talk about that quite a lot in the book, and the training that I do as well, because that's really important. So for some children, their needs are as such that they need us to intervene, they need us to be able to support them with early intervention or early help. We call that early help in England, it's referred to as early help. Or sometimes, of course, children need us to step in to recognise that their level of need is as such that they are at risk of significant harm. And that's when we're talking about child protection. And that's when we're talking about having to engage with people like statutory services such as social care, so that we can make possible a process that will protect them that involves statutory services. So that's really important. So for me, the knowledge and skill that early years practitioners, and I'm referring to early years practitioners. I know we may have different terms that we use in the early years, but I'm using that phrase generally. But yeah, children are dependent on us to be able to be to be knowledgeable and skilled, but also, and we think about the role that we have as key person with a child in the early years. So sometimes it's being able to gather information about the child. Sometimes it's about being able to know the broader context within their families and their wider world, even outside of the home. But sometimes it's also because we get to know children really well through that relationship and through those attachments. Sometimes it's about the softer skills that we use to pick up those cues that we might get that children, just because of the relationship they have with us, are able to communicate, and that might be an anxious child, that might be a nervous child, that might be a child that's feeling overwhelmed because of circumstances that may be happening at home. It can be a whole range of things. But yeah, so I talk about the 3 C's a lot, and I'll talk about those. I'll tell you what they are. Should I tell you what they are? The 3 C's.
Please.
First C is being compliant. And that, this kind of focuses on the designated leads, but for everyone really. To be compliant, we need to be sure that we're meeting our legal responsibilities. And the second C is competent, to be good at what we do, which is really what we're just talking about. And then the third C is about being confident, because you can't have those first 2 C's without having the last one, being confident to actually act upon something. And that requires us to be confident, doesn't it, Glenn? I bet you can think of times when you've been in a position where you've just had to kind of go, right, okay, I'm not quite sure exactly what might be happening here, but I'm going to do something about it.
Absolutely.
And that confidence kind of gives you the push to, right, okay. So, and it's interesting as well, because I often talk about when we're confident, sometimes it doesn't mean we have to know all the answers. Being confident doesn't mean we have to know everything about child protection or safeguarding. Being confident means that we need to know what the next step is for us to take in order to be professionally curious. That's a phrase we use a lot, isn't it?
Yeah.
So to be curious about a situation, or to be confident enough to tell our designated lead that we may have a concern, or be confident enough to have a conversation with a parent, or if we're leads in our settings and we're designated leads, confident to engage with people, other professionals, to have those conversations, and to also really be able to, again, go back to that phrase we used earlier on, be that advocate for the child that they need us to be. So yeah, there's a whole range of things that I guess we need to be, but I think sometimes you can sum it up in those 3 C's quite nicely.
Definitely. The confidence one resounds with me as well. I mean, I think back to, now I've been doing this like coming up for 27 years in early years. And I think if I think back to me now, where I'm quite dobby when I need to be, but back then, like when I first started, when I was fresh out of college and full of theory, but little practice.
Yes.
But would I have been able to do that? I don't think I would have done.
Yeah.
And I think it was down to the other people around me to give me that confidence as well. And I think that's where I think having the specific training comes in as well. Do you think that really specific focused in training on child protection and safeguarding is really important? Is it crucial?
Oh, absolutely. Crucial. I can't begin to say how important that is. And I think we've had an interesting season in early years that has we've gone through a period of time, pandemic, post-pandemic, and obviously, being part of that and being part of the process. And I think in some ways we've lost our way a little bit in child protection training. You're nodding, and I'm kind of, because I do think that, you're kind of saying this is the case. I think we have lost our way a little bit. And those people who know me will know I get on my hobby horse here a little bit, because I think we've been led by some features in practice that haven't always been the right things, or they haven't been the things that we need to focus on predominantly. And I think for a start, I think we need real, credible, authentic training. We need to be helped and supported by people who have kind of, like you said, had the experience, been there, done it, built their confidence sometimes. And I relate to myself here. Confidence has come because actually I might not have always got it right at times, but I've learned from it. But also, and I have the pleasure of working with lots of fantastic practitioners who are in social care, who are still my go-to, and I speak to them a lot. In fact, I even have professional supervision from one ex-colleague of mine who's a social worker, and we share things and we talk about things, and so drawing on people's knowledge and understanding and making sure that the basis of our underpinning knowledge is authentic, and it's based on evidence, and it's based in statistics, it's based in social care, good social care practice and principles, is really important. And so yeah, I think we've drifted a little bit in the sector of late, and I feel like we need to kind of re-establish to an extent some really good principles around training and around certainly about child protection. And I think sometimes it's easy to clump it all together and call safeguarding, have the term safeguarding, when actually there's three distinct areas for me. There's health and safety, which comes into that context. We've got safeguarding, and sometimes that can be focused on early intervention, if it's around supporting children, when their needs are not too high in terms of risk. And then we've got child protection. And I think my real passion for the early years sector is to understand the distinct areas of those three things. And I think from my own experience and conversations I have with some fantastic practitioners who I have the privilege to work alongside, and others who I'm yet to work with, and I, new kind of relationships that I'm building, I think we really need to get to grips with a better understanding of child protection rather than just clump it all together and call it safeguarding. Because children, going back to what we started with, need us to understand the distinct differences and be able to know how to respond. Does that make sense, Glenn?
It does, yeah. I think you're right as well. I mean, it's difficult for me because having been in England where we called it safeguarding, and now I've been in Scotland and we call it child protection.
Yes,
it's
they do,
a bit where I need to kind of pull it apart, like which bit's which, But you're right, safeguarding is a very big umbrella term, and I think again it's down to my knowledge, down to my understanding, and down to my experience as well. And the other bit that resonated that you said there was about getting it wrong. And I have done that. Not to the detriment of the child. I will be very clear on that. The child was not harmed. There was nothing. It was purely a concern that was escalated the wrong way. And in fact, it was the social care team that got it wrong. But it was a bad experience. But I didn't let it put me off safeguarding and protecting these children. But you're right, the bad experiences, it's all part of the kind of ongoing training, if you like, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes, we mustn't expect those who are new to the sector to understand the same things that we've learned. Those of us who, and I'm calling it myself here, I'm very, very old now, and I've been doing it for a long time. But I think, and that's what you're saying, actually, as you've learned, you've been alongside people who can help you and support you. And I think it's so important to draw on the experience of others and have, and have those mentors and have those people around you who can encourage you. And you used an example of when you said, you clearly none of us know everything at one time, and we're growing our experience and our knowledge. And I remember starting working in children's services, well, actually it was called social services then in England, and I was working in social daycare, and I remember thinking, oh my goodness, what if I get it wrong? What if I, because all these children were on, we called it a child protection register. They call it that in Scotland, don't they, still, a child protection register?
Yeah.
But the terminology's changed in England. It's now called a child protection plan. But most of the children, because it was social care, and because it was social services, it was, it was really high-end child protection, and I hadn't got a lot of experience, and it really concerned me. But when I look back now, those years were so formative for me in my learning. I frequently, I mean, some of the anecdotes I use in the book, I drew on some of those memories that I had working with some of those children. I frequently think about the lessons I learned when I wasn't as experienced. And when I translate that now into working with, I was doing some training just last week or a few weeks ago, and we were talking about Victoria Climbié, as most of people who are listening will probably recognize, or they'll know the name. And I mentioned Victoria Climbié, and there was a number of people there, younger staff, people who were working in, it was a family assessment centre actually, never heard of Victoria Climbié, and you forget, don't you? But
Yeah.
I think what we need to do is not to be presumptuous that everyone's going to know the same things, and everybody needs a different level or a different extent of application in terms of their learning. But one of the most powerful things is having someone alongside you who can walk and talk you through it, which is absolutely, well, it's invaluable, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I mean, you were talking there, and actually, you kind of brought back a memory for me that the reason why I feel that child protection is it's a core element. It's a very key thing that I do throughout all of my practice, and that stemmed from many years ago. I did. Now, this shows how old I was. I did a YT scheme, the youth training scheme,
Oh, right, yes.
in a child and family centre down in South Wales. I was living there at the time.
Right.
And we had an incident that happened there, where regrettably the child passed away. They were only a baby.
Gosh.
But this whole thing, it turned out they'd been abused by their father. Now, again, it was a social services
Yeah.
centre, so
Yeah.
all the children were referred there. It wasn't just a day nursery where you could pick up. But this has stuck with me. It's not haunted me, but it has stuck with me and underpinned why I feel that child protection is so important. And it kind of it influences my practice. So, years ago, I was part of the Scout Association as a leader trainer, and I went on to do the safeguarding trainer training. So I did all that as well. And I think you have those little moments within your working life or even your own personal life where you think it just makes you realize just how important that is.
Absolutely. They're key milestones, aren't they, in your learning and in your career? And they're the things that actually, what's the word? I can't even think of the word. They're the catalyst moments, aren't they? That enable you to, you take those with you wherever you go, and they're really important. And they're kind of the little jewels in the crown that you pull down, and sometimes those things can be tragedies, sadly, when you're talking about child protection, but you learn so much from them. And it shapes you, not only as a person, but it shapes you as a practitioner, and it informs your practice going forward. And that's really important. That's really invaluable, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, the other thing as well that I look at in terms of training, yes, we do our annual refresher training. A lot of it for a lot of settings, and I know it's time. You do the online courses where you just sit there and you click through.
Yeah, sure.
But that's the bit for me. It's like, okay, it is cost effective to settings, it's time effective, but also I worry that does it go in? And for me, I've extended that practice within my setting where I randomly pick a child protection question each week, and I will go around and I will ask my team individually, not as a group. I will go out and ask them individually, what does this mean? What's this?
Sure.
Because I want to make sure that training that they've undertaken, when they've clicked through it all, has it gone in? Has it stayed there? Are they able to use it? Can they pull it forward when it's needed?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm with you on that. And that's kind of going back to what I was saying earlier on about, one size doesn't fit all. And we need to be able to shape our kind of, as leaders, and if we're leaders and managers, we need to shape our training and application of training to meet the needs of the learners. whatever level they are and
Mhm.
whatever amount of experience they've had. So that, I mean, shameless plug here, but that's very much what my safeguarding hub's all about. You know, it's having different levels and resources that can be appropriate for apprentices, for intermediate, and for designated leads. So that's kind of the focus, because I do worry that sometimes, again, the training or the kind of the approach to safeguarding, it doesn't meet everyone's needs, and we really
No.
need to think about that. You know, and more importantly, and anyone who knows me and who might be listening to this will go, here she goes again banging the drum. But more importantly, we need to understand the needs of our own children in our setting. And that sounds obvious, but I think sometimes in the early years we can chase after the themes that might not be as relevant as the needs that are right in front of us with children that we're working with. And also certainly in England, and it'll be the same across the whole of the UK really, in whatever nation, but understanding our local authority priorities, so our local safeguarding partners priorities. England calls them local safeguarding partners. Scotland, we've got local authorities. But if we understand the priorities, and the priorities are determined, and again, this is why I say it's so important to use that evidence base. Priorities are decided upon in local authorities on the community, the demographics, the risks that are known and perceived in that community or in those areas. And they're also focused very much on learning from case reviews, you know, and that's child safeguarding practice reviews in England, significant case reviews in Scotland. Our learning from those case reviews, if it's a local authority or a local area, will also determine. And it's important to, because I think sometimes we can, and hear me when I say this, we can focus on things like FGM, or we can focus on prevent. And that's all very well, but actually local priorities show us, if we look at, and I was reading recently, if we look at priorities, the big ones are neglect, massively so, and then domestic abuse. And then we've got things like child criminal exploitation. And then we've got risks outside of the family, sometimes called extrafamilial risks. And that might be online risks or things that are going on in communities, or with school children, it might be child-on-child abuse, emotional, mental well-being. They're the big themes that sit in local priorities. So I'm saying, don't not look at FGM, don't not talk about prevent, but let's really get to grips with what the issues are for the children that we're working with in our settings and in our communities.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the dynamics of the families or the family groupings that we have, that the kind of the catchment area to our settings can also inform that as well. So, you know, it all depends who you've got coming to your setting. It might have, well, like you say, different needs, different kind of expectations, things like that.
Absolutely. And, you know, and I work a lot with local authorities. I deliver on behalf, been for many years, been delivering to local authorities, and every local authority is different. And they will have a priority that is often the common priorities are the ones that I've just mentioned, but there'll be things that are kind of specific within that. And so when going back to training, that's why it's important when we look at our training that we don't just have a scatter gun approach in terms of, you know, a bit of this, bit of that, and throw a bit of that in for good luck. And what we need to do is have a wide understanding and have a wide knowledge base, but we need to be competent in understanding what is it for our children, what, you know, what's going on in our families. If we're in a city, I mean, I worked for quite a long time well, I live and work in Greater Manchester, but so I worked in a city in Salford actually, and some of the key themes there were very different to some neighbouring hood authorities still in Greater Manchester, say such as Rochdale, which are a little further away, but totally different demographic. And I suppose ultimately, you were talking about online training, and there is an element of that kind of, I go back to what I said before, one size doesn't fit all. We need to be really more tuned into what's going on in our children's lives, understanding the lived experience of children and families and the communities that we're working in, you know, which can be so different. So different, which is why I've got quite a bit of a thing about Ofsted inspections, because sometimes inspectors, when they go and inspect in an early years setting, don't get that element either, and that can be quite a problem.
I know that's definitely a thing. I mean, having gone through an Ofsted inspection, which I mean, I have to say, to be fair to them, actually, the inspection we had was lovely.
Yeah.
It was unexpected. They just literally pitched up at the door. We didn't get the phone call the day before. I literally had to go barreling in quick because the manager was on a day off. I was on a day off. And the nursery director wasn't due in till 9:30, and I was the nearest senior, so I ended up coming in.
Ended up holding the fort. Yeah.
But it's that bit where somebody's coming in and they don't necessarily know you. They don't know your setting. They don't know your families. Where
exactly
like we were talking about the key worker approach, and that is vital because each key worker understands their group of children. I mean, I'm a setting manager, but I'm not a key worker, but I understand my children.
Yes.
I've got 60 odd children on my roll, and I can tell you about all of them. And it's that bit where we get to know them. So like you say, it's not that one size fits all. Like one person coming in doesn't necessarily know them, and that's up to us again. We're going back to advocacy again, is to speak up for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And the relationship, which gives so many other dimensions to knowledge about a child and a family than just even if you just read it on a paper, So it's multifaceted, isn't it? There's a word. But yeah, it is. It goes beyond that. But yeah, so I think sometimes it does concern me that we can chase after what Ofsted want. In fact, that's an understatement. It causes me great concern. I've worked in lots of different contexts with Ofsted, not just early years, in children's centres, in local authorities, in schools for a while when I was part of a senior leadership team in a school. So looking at the whole context of it, it does concern me that I think we just chase after what we think they want and what we think they want to hear from us. And really, it's about bringing it back to those families. I remember someone once saying to me they were really worried because they were asked, with childminder actually, they were asked a question about something that they knew very little about, and she thought that wouldn't be very good. It would look like it's a weakness. And it was a training situation in a local authority I was working with. And I said to her, let's talk about your priorities in your local authority, of which she knew all of them and really knew them well, and her children, of which she knew really well. And I said, isn't it more important that you were able to say, I don't know about that particular topic, but I do know about this, and this, and I know about my children. And as we started to unpick that, you could see she felt a little bit easier. But I think sometimes we focus too much on what we think we don't know rather than build on what we do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. I think it's that bit where you need that broad base of understanding about the various different elements to it. But actually, it's not narrowing down. No, narrowing down is not what I'm trying to say. But
I know what you said. Yeah, I know what you said.
It's that focus where everything's in the peripheral vision.
Yeah,
it's almost, and then you're narrowing down to where you are and who you're with.
Yeah, no, totally. It is about that though, isn't it? But yeah, this is why I have massive problems with kind of, I'm not saying building competencies and upskilling staff, but I'm kind of the random stuff about, just kind of getting people to go through a tick list and know what the acronyms are and know what this means. Do you know, that might be important, but it's not as important. And that's what I'm trying to say. And I think so that's why I feel like we've just lost track a little bit in the early years when it comes to training. And I think also when it comes to understanding how we build those competencies. And let's be honest, when we talk about designated safeguarding leads, I think we're currently operating in some of the most challenging times within social care. I'm sure you will agree, you see it in your own settings. When I think about that, because I worked in social care for so many years, when I think about where we are now, we've gone backwards in terms of where we were for effective multi-agency practice. And by the way, the caveat will be that there'll be some people listening to this and thinking, well, that's not me. I've got great relationships with social care. That's fantastic. But generally, I hear that that's not the case, because I have lots of conversations with people who are struggling to represent their children, and explain why they think their risks are higher than early help and early intervention, and why they're trying to really get those referrals through the front door. Or sometimes when they're in case reviews or strategy meetings or case conferences, where they perhaps their role is played down when it really shouldn't be. It should be embraced, and there should be better collaboration going. So, but I think the challenges in the context of social care are greater than they ever were when I worked in it, for sure. And I speak to my colleagues who are still working in it now, and they will say absolutely that is the case. So the challenges are still there. So we need to, and this, I hope this doesn't sound too it's not condemnatory, or it's not a reprimand, but I just think we need to raise the bar a little bit, so we can be really good at what we do, because we need to have those skills, and we need to have those the understandings about how to engage and navigate the things through social care, and navigate our way through that system, which is quite problematic.
It really is. Again, a lot of it, I mean, you can tell me if I'm wrong, and I don't mind, is that like early years, social care as well is so heavily underfunded and understaffed.
Yeah,
There's a huge shortage of people. I mean, I'm finding it here. If you're trying to get a hold of, like, for example, I was trying to get a hold of Ed Site recently for one of our children, and it was so difficult. I was literally getting passed around and passed around and passed around, and you're frustrated. But I had the determination to keep pushing because I knew this was right for this
yeah,
child. But
yeah.
it's difficult, and like both sides are getting the blame, and I'm not going to get political and say who I'm going to say blaming, but it's not fair. We're both struggling. We're both trying to do the best for children, but with limited resources and with limited human resources as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I totally agree with what you're saying, Glenn, 100%. And what we need to not forget is this workforce crisis that we are seeing in the early years is in lots of other sectors. We can see it very much in the public sector. It's in social care. That's why we've had a review into transforming social care in England, which came out, I nearly said last year, but it's actually the year before now. We're in 2024. But the review that was done by Josh McAllister, there's a whole chapter on workforce, because recognizing the areas where it needs to be strengthened and better. And so yeah, that makes it even more challenging. And ultimately, you're right about being determined to get a result for a child. Of course, that is our goal, isn't it, when we're trying to get the right outcome for a child. And sometimes we just really need to understand how we can work our way through that system. Many places and local authorities will have what they call an escalation policy or procedure, or a resolution, a professional resolution policy. And I find that still a lot of people don't know about that. And I was supporting someone recently, and it's different to a complaints procedure. It's not that we're complaining about something. It's actually a policy which has been created that is there to help us get that right outcome for the child and work together to make it possible. It's something the local authorities provided. And, that's just one example. If we knew how to engage with that, if we understood the importance of using that, which, by the way, a lot of case reviews draw on the fact that that's something we should be doing. Sadly, it's too late when we're talking about a case review, because something tragic has happened. So understanding and navigating our way around those systems, I guess ultimately, sometimes we need a little bit of help with that. And sometimes, and more often than not, training won't always include that. But, having someone who's kind of been there before and who's kind of just able to just give a suggestion or whatever is really important. And having someone, like you said before, who's walked the walk a little bit longer than some of us have, or someone, or you getting alongside someone who's just starting out and helping them on their journey as well is really important.
Definitely. Well, Rachel, time has got against us, I'm afraid. I know, but it's been absolutely amazing to talk to you. I mean, child protection was always super important to me, but you've just kind of like gold-plated it now as to why I know it's so important in my practice. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. And you know what? And I know for everyone who's listening, what amazing jobs you're doing. I want to say that because I'm blown away all the time by some of the things that I see in practice. And I'm so grateful, as I'm sure children are, that we're there to do it. And yeah, being those advocates that you say for them. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me on today.
No, you're more than welcome, Rachel. But thank you very much.